But the only, the funny thing is, after I got over the guilt, the other thing that really annoyed me was my husband, every opportunity, he's a wonderful storyteller. He would tell the birth story. And everyone's like, "Oh, you delivered the baby!" Oh, over and over again. And I wasn't sure why it was annoying me so much because I thought maybe postpartum hormones, but it made me angry. I would always interrupt his storytelling and it was annoying, and I would interrupt and just go straight to the end because I was sick of people being like, "You delivered the baby, that's amazing," over and over and over again. It was like
Yeah.
one or two times. And then I was like, why am I erased from this story? Why do I have no role?
Yes.
And I don't want a gold star because I do feel like I wish I'd known I was in labor. I wish I'd called the midwives. I wish I had been monitored. It is scary. Like, it is super scary not to know you're in labor and then to feel to have the baby's head and then be like, "Oh no, I made a mistake. Like, I missed this. Oh no." There was a guilt, and there's also
Mm,
like, you're not being monitored. So what if something went wrong? And my brain went there. What if this happened? It took a while to get over that. But
yeah.
I know from a woman's experience how scary it is to have a no no one monitoring you. You're basically a medically unsupervised birth. And of course, it's a natural process, but it's also like, you want it to be supervised. Midwives do a lot during a labor. Doctors do a lot. They're monitoring you. They're checking your blood pressure. They're checking how you're doing. They're telling you how much you're dilated. They're telling you, they're coaching you when to breathe. I'm lucky I didn't get serious tears because I wasn't coached. I wasn't
Yeah.
told,
Because it can
breathe.
happen with more precipitous births where you can get bigger tears. So,
Yeah.
and I think that I always say, like, if we lived in a culture and society where birth was normalized and not medicalized, there would be more births like yours. And people wouldn't have as much fear around it because it would be like, oh, yeah, this is just what we do. This is what you know what to do. You know what the signs to look out for yourself. But we don't live in that kind of world. We live in a world where on TV, we see scary births all the time. We see emergency scenarios all the time. And we start to think that when birth is happening, that, oh, what could go, like, could things go wrong, instead of like,
Yes.
I'm just thinking like a wild animal giving birth. They're not thinking what could go wrong. They're just like, all right, I'm just gonna do my thing and give birth. And so I think that speaks to the fact that we culturally, our society needs to change our perspective on birth and go back to the fact that birth is innate. Just like throwing
Hmm.
up, I always say, you don't need to be taught how to throw up. Body just does it. When you
Yeah.
have the urge, you just go. And birth can also be innate, like yours was, where your body just took over and you didn't have to fight it. You didn't have to do anything. It just happened. And again, I'm so glad everything did go okay at the end with your son and with you and everything. But that guilt piece is something that I feel I wouldn't have thought of or known. And I think, thank you for sharing that. And I did a reel a while ago. It's like, why, when people ask who delivered your baby, it's you.
Yes. And
Whether you had a C-section or vaginal birth, it's always
I
you.
we had this conversation on Instagram and I was
Yeah.
like, yes, I love it. I love what you're saying and I relate to everything. And it's weird because it's not that I wanted a gold star, like, yay, me, but it's just I wanted acknowledgement that I went through a birth without medical supervision and that was tough. So, like, yay,
Yeah.
pat on the
You just want
back.
to be seen,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Like,
yeah,
I'm part of the story. It's almost like I wasn't there. And it's like it just happened. The baby just happened. And it's like I wasn't there. And my husband delivered it. Everyone in Egypt, they heard about the story and they're like, "Oh, yeah, he'll deliver. He'll do all it's like he did everything and all the steps." I'm like, there wasn't really, like, it fell out. And I 100% props to him. And I'm
for
not
staying
saying,
calm
but
and everything.
but
Yeah.
it's just the way everyone reacts is like, "Oh, he delivered, he did it over." And then I went on the internet, I looked up different precipitous labors and stories, and the women's erased in 100% of them. So I do think there's an element of patriarchy where it's like,
Yes.
security guard delivered baby, 9-year-old
Taxi cab
delivered baby,
driver. Yeah.
taxi cab driver delivered baby. And again, like, good for them for being calm in the situation, calling 911, but the baby was going to come. It was going to come. It would have come if the woman's alone. It was going to come.
Yeah.
And there was what really angered me. Like, my husband is not like out to take credit, but he just like likes to say like,
It's a
"Look,
story.
it's
Yeah.
it's our
It's
story,"
and it's a great
and
story, right?
it
So
is. And
yeah.
he's a great storyteller. So, like, it is annoying. I keep interrupting him. But, but I read a few, when I was Googling precipitous labor, I read some really annoying, like, there's a guy that was like, "Oh, yeah, my wife had," again, no picture of the wife, picture of the guy, his age, his occupation. He delivered these two babies at home, both times they didn't have time to go to the hospital. Oh, gee, I hope it doesn't happen again because poor me. And I'm like, excuse me, the woman had two unmedically supervised birth and you want me to sympathize to you? What about your wife? How do you think she was feeling? I know how she was feeling and it's stressful. So no,
Yeah.
no, like, not poor me.
Yeah.
How about we talk about this woman that did all these births, and it's like, oh wow, like cool, and
Yeah.
I'm not, again, not gold star, but like if you're gonna share the story, don't erase the
Share,
woman
well,
because
and share it from the perspective of the person who is doing the work.
yeah,
And this
and
is, I see a parallel between, it is patriarchy, and there's also a parallel between that and like white supremacy, like our history books. Whose story are they telling? Right.
yes,
Like, when we learn
exactly,
about Canadian history, we don't even learn about Indigenous history or
exactly.
Indigenous people's current day. We don't learn that. And so oftentimes it's like the person, and it's not, sometimes it's not even done intentionally to
I
harm.
I
It
don't
is
believe
just,
it's
it's
done.
not.
Yeah,
It's just done because that's what we are used to seeing.
yeah.
The doctors, oh, I got there just in time to catch the baby. But you're like, okay, but how did that mother feel when she was waiting without a um, doctor present or a midwife present, right?
And
And
that's the part that I feel like I want to hear about. When if you're telling that story, mention the
that needs to
woman's
be told.
experience and acknowledge that in all cases, like you said, it's always a woman that delivers. It's always a woman that did 99% of the work, going through labor, not sleeping, especially people who have difficult, painful labors. It's a sacrifice. And it's like
It is
good,
a huge
it's a
sacrifice.
beautiful thing, but it's hard and it's icky and you feel gross. And you really, I mean, people who go to, I'm sure, past the 40, to 41 weeks, I'm sure at that point you're like, oh, again, come on, just go.
Oh,
And it's
I went
hot.
to 41 with my first, and it was
Yeah.
it was really hard. And I think that um I think one part that's not talked about is, even if you end up with a C-section, you still did 99.9999%.
Exactly.
All the other person did is
And you
splice
have
and
this
sew, right?
recovery
You are
of
doing all the work.
and recovery from major abdominal surgery that
Yeah.
you are doing for your children that you love. And it's like it's a beautiful thing to give your body to, like, it's such a beautiful
It is a
thing.
sacrifice and it is
Yeah,
beautiful.
and it should be honored. And maybe if we honored it, it would be like treated like other surgeries where we understand that the process takes weeks. If I wasn't ready, I probably had the easiest birth imaginable, and I wasn't ready to return to exercise in 4 weeks. My pelvic floor, other areas still needed healing. So it gives pause at how, if you have more complicated birth, if you go through abdominal surgery for C-section, you need more time to
You need
recover.
more time.
And if we say, like, maybe if we acknowledge the mother's role in this delivery, then maybe we would acknowledge that there's more time needed for recovery. There's, your body's been through a lot, and especially like diet culture. And I have friends that they couldn't breastfeed, and I have no opinion, breastfeed, formula fed is best, but they were barely eating. I saw them, they were barely eating, and I knew it wasn't my place, but they're trying to lose a baby weight. And I'm like, of course you're not
Mm.
going to be able to breastfeed if you're not eating enough.
You
You
can't make
can't
milk if you're
you
not
can't
eating
be in a
enough calories.
calorie
Yeah.
deficit and feeding your child. You kind of need more calories. I think you even need more calories when you're
You do.
breastfeeding than when you're pregnant. Like
Yeah.
it's
My
probably
midwives were
300.
like, remember,
Yeah.
your baby comes out. My daughter was 8 pounds. She's like, she's gonna be 10 pounds soon. So you need to feed a 10-pound baby and you're exclusively breastfeeding. So you need more calories. And I was like,
I read 300
ravenous.
pound 300 extra calories when you're pregnant minimum,
Yes.
and 500, again, it depends on your activity levels and other things, 500 extra when you're breastfeeding,
Yeah.
500 instead of 300. So there's more.
It's
And
more
then
you need
because
to
of
eat.
diet culture, the moment you have your baby, it's like, okay, you're not harming the baby anymore, so diet. And it's like, no, your body needs to recover. So what if you have a tummy? So what if you gained weight? I was 135 before, and by the time I had my baby, I was 180,
Yeah.
and my baby was small. So what? Like you,
Yeah.
and some people gain more, some people gain less, and it doesn't matter. But like, don't pressure yourself to return. It took me more than it was more than a year before I returned, and my body changed. Like I have broader shoulders just from holding the baby. That's before my
More
chin-ups. I
muscle.
have
Yeah.
more muscle because it's physical. Even if you're not working out, you are carrying a baby, so you are working out
You
because
are working out.
you're
Yeah.
feeding, you're lifting this car seat to get in the car. Like there's a lot of physical. It's very physical having a baby, so you are doing work, and it's like, don't you don't need to engage in diet culture. You shouldn't be thinking about that for a long time. Don't, please, this is not the time to be diet culturing. And there's a lot of pressure, but like I
Ignore that.
purposely, when I joined it, like,
Unfollow accounts that
yeah,
make
when
you
I
feel
joined,
bad.
like I
Yeah.
like just like the same reason I love your base program. That's great, like, because it's good to not think about your workouts when you have the baby. Even if you have a fitness background, it's good to just not think about anything, to do something for yourself. And it's good to have short, like I tell people, like my workouts became like 15 minutes and I with the kid crying, like it's like it would have been, I didn't have childcare, I didn't have access to a gym. So I always
Yes.
built it around my kid. So like I would say half-ass your workout. Yes, please. Like if you didn't get much sleep, do 5 minutes. Like it doesn't matter. And I kept my kettlebells in my living room. And
Yeah.
I remember people come visit and say, "Oh my gosh, your baby might knock them over." I'm like, "They're 35 pounds. My baby is not even, my
Yeah.
baby is 8 pounds. It's not gonna happen. He's not
Yeah.
gonna knock
It's
it
like,
over."
could I move a 500-pound weight? No. So my baby
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
eat
So
it.
I
Yeah.
just remove all barriers and but don't pressure yourself
I love that.
because it's not like you are working out regardless because kids are physical. Parents who have disabilities, they're still being physical. You know, you don't have to hold your child standing up, obviously. Like there's no one way to parent and there's no one way to like if you can't carry the child because of your back, it's all fine, but you will
Yeah.
be moving one way or
You will
another.
be, and you will be working out. And I think that's the point that I like to make is, I love that you said like at 4 weeks you weren't ready for exercise. And I always say it depends what exercise is, because you already are exercising as soon as you bring the baby home and you're walking, sometimes climbing upstairs, sometimes just holding. That is all exercise. Like my arms were jacked, just
Yeah,
from holding. And then,
exactly.
once baby starts walking, then my arms went back normal. But, it's just, goes to show that exercise doesn't have to be one thing. You can start exercising. I work with clients virtually. So it's super easy for them. They book in the first week, 10 days postpartum. We're getting started with very basic core, pelvic floor, gentle functional movements because they're ready for it. And they're already doing it anyways. And so I teach them how to do it in a way that actually supports their healing and supports their mobility and reduces aches and pains, so that as they get to that 4 week, 6 week, 8 week mark, they can start going to those stroller fit classes and those
Yeah.
those more active classes and feel successful in
Mhm.
it. And I
And
think it's
jump and this, but it's like everything will
the
come, but like
it's a
be patient.
process.
It's not the time to rush it. Some people can run earlier than others. It doesn't matter. It's not, it's a very personal thing. Don't compare yourself to another mom or to other people. You just do you, and your body will tell you, like you when you feel awful, that's probably too much. Like dial it down. If you feel like you shouldn't feel worse. If you feel awful, then it's probably like you're not getting enough sleep, you're not eating. I mean, no one's getting enough sleep, but like not perfect, and also it's okay, dial it back. You just did something
Yeah.
major and
There's no
it's
like rush to get back to anything,
no, no. And
it's more like exercise has to support you and your life and not take away from it. So if you exercise, I believe every mom hopefully gets stronger postpartum. Other than baby carrying,
hmm,
I think lifting weights is
hmm,
important because it
hmm.
helps to make mom life easier. It's
Yes,
so much
yes,
easier to carry my toddler when I have strong arms and legs,
I would have been
you
able
know?
to handle it if I didn't have like all, I needed all my strength, let's just put it that way, to handle the demands of motherhood. And
Yeah.
so like I would hope every mom has the ability to
Access
do it
to,
pain free, like not have like the leaks are so common, everything is so common. So you'd hope that if you eventually get referred to a pelvic floor, get check your diastasis, not to panic, but just know everyone's going to have a diastasis. So when I went to Jess, she checked, she said, oh, it's like minor, it's pretty small. And just so you're aware, I'm not like a caution like don't do this, don't do that, but just so you know.
and new evidence really says you don't even really need to check, because in the early postpartum phase, everybody has one. So
Hmm.
checking for it sometimes scares people because they're like, oh, I have 3 finger wide diastasis. Oh, I have 2 finger, and they get obsessed about the numbers. And I'm like, listen, you already know you're going to have looseness. You already know
Hmm.
you've got to do these exercises. As long as you don't have a hernia, then we need to look at it a little bit more. But let's focus on the work that needs to be done. Wait at least 3 months before, in my opinion, checking for diastasis, prolapse, or not even checking for prolapse, or grading the prolapse, like saying, oh, you're
Hmm.
stage 1, stage 2, because there's a lot of innate healing that happens. Even if we did nothing, even if we did do
Exactly.
any exercise, your body's already healing.
Exactly.
So we don't need to be planting fears and like, oh, you've got this degree or this degree,
Yeah,
because
yeah, it's so true.
people get scared.
And what I want people to know is if you do feel like down the road, several months after, a year after, that you're still having issues, you could see a pelvic floor physio. You could get
Yeah.
help for that. People don't even know that exists. Like um,
How is it in
it
Egyptian culture? Is there a lot of knowledge on that?
no, I would say
Same with
no.
Indian culture. They're like, what? Excuse me, what do you do? And I'm like, I do it
Yeah, yeah.
virtually. Don't worry. I don't even
I
have
know,
to put
and
my
again,
fingers,
diet culture is huge in Egypt, at
Oh, is
least
it?
amongst my family. So it's very much like
Mm,
when I
lots of
saw
weight.
my aunts are like, "Oh, look at you! You lost this much weight." That all the comments are about appearance, and you really don't want that. Like you kind of
Yeah.
your body changes. I there was a year where I didn't know what my size was. I had a bazillion pants, and I would be in the like, "Does this one fit? No. Okay, this one. Okay, yeah." Like you could just like you don't know know, but it's like I would be cautious to comment, even in the positive, negative.
Yeah.
I
I
just don't
think just even
comment.
commenting is,
And because again, with the hormones and everything, you're really sensitive to anything.
yeah.
So like just say it's a nice day or how are you doing, but don't make it about the body. Just make it about other things. And
Like, how are you feeling? Like, I felt
yeah,
after my first child, I had prolapse and leaks and I felt awful, but I looked like I bounced back. The day after I gave birth, I went back to my pre-baby size. I was literally all baby.
wow.
And everyone was like, what's your secret? Like, as if I had done something special. And I'm like, does nobody care how I actually feel? And I really
Yeah.
felt like nobody cared. They just cared that I bounced back physically. And then after my second, I'm a lot heavier than I was, but I feel so good. But nobody's telling me I look great. And that messes with you too, because you're like, oh, but last time people did. How come they're not saying it this time? And so this is the problem with diet culture and the
Yeah.
the over obsession about women's bodies and how they look. And I have really gone away from accounts, people, my family's pretty
Yeah.
good. Indian culture, they're usually, depending on the Indian, right? Some parts of India or some families, I should say, I'm not going to generalize for
Hmm.
an entire country, but some families are more into it than others. I find most South Indian families are less so because there's a little bit more conservative, like we don't talk about bodies and sex
Right,
and,
right. And
physicality.
a sorry, because my husband's from Bangladesh, so I have exposure through his culture, which has been wonderful. Like I love Indian cuisine. I love the saris. I have 20 of them, but I don't know how to put them on, which is kind of a waste because
I'll do
like
a
I can't wear
tutorial.
them. Please, no, please, if we can like video tutorial because it's such a waste. It's a beautiful garment. And it's a nice garment because it's not overly like
Yes,
you can breastfeed a child with a sari. You can have, your belly grow or whatever, no one will notice. Like it's actually a really nice
it is. It's a
practical
beautiful,
garment.
practical garment. Yeah.
I can see a lot of uses for it. So I'm kind of like, wow, this is cool because I'd never, it's different. Like we don't have that clothes in Egypt. So I was just like fascinated by it. And we all like love it. We're like, oh, it's so pretty, but like I can't put it on. It would look like a toga. Like I can't like I admire the skill and I admire like it's like what 8 meters of fabric. And I'm
It's
just like
like
that
you can
becomes
get
a
6 yards
garment.
or 9 yards depending on the length. Yeah.
Wow. Like
Yeah. And
wow.
then it
And then
becomes this beautiful thing. And there's like
yeah,
so many different ways to wear it too.
different
Different
styles and like
styles. Yeah.
how neat. And
So
then you have to
versatile.
yeah, like so I admire that. And I think it's handy. I'm not saying like you shouldn't wear revealing clothes and show your belly. You definitely should wear what you want, but it's nice that there's a garment that doesn't like
There's an
it
option.
you have the choice to be like it's not like it doesn't have to be there if you don't want it. You can kind of like
Listen,
dress.
never have I felt so not judged in Indian culture because I was always too small. It's always too thin. It's not
Hmm.
curvy. I was tiny. I was like 100 pounds, right? So then after I had my second, I have curves now. I have fat. And nobody says anything about my body.
That's
And I'm like,
great.
this is great. Because before it was, oh, you need to eat more. You need to eat more. Now nobody judges, nobody says anything. So
In
it's like the reverse diet
in
culture
in
there.
Bengali culture, and at least amongst the family friends, when they see me, they're like, "Oh, you gained weight! Great! You really
Yeah.
look better! Like you
Yeah.
needed that." Like I was like, "Oh wow, this is like a contrast." Like they're all
It's
like
such a
happy.
contrast.
They're
Yeah.
like they're so happy. They're like it's like I guess I'm more womanly
Hey,
now. I don't know.
the
Like
bigger the better, because again, in certain cultures, there's a lot of poverty and lack of food. And so you being bigger reflects health and richness and wealth, right? So it's a sign that you're doing well. And I always think like my ancestors would be so proud to see that their lineage has continued and is eating and is doing well. And so I
and
often think about
thriving.
it from that way and thriving, right? And I
Yeah,
think
that's great.
it is judgment on either end is not good, whether you're too thin,
No.
you're too big, but at least it's hopefully happening less and less in our communities. And I think our generation is changing the game because we are raising children with that forethought
Mhm.
of not pushing diet culture on them, not
Yes,
pushing these
yes.
unrealistic standards
I
on them.
admit I have a hard time not telling my son to finish his plate or to eat. Like I'm trying to be very neutral with the food language, but it's hard because sometimes like he only wants to eat hot dogs and chicken nuggets, and you're like, no, 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 you need your veggies. Come on, finish your peas. Come on, finish. Like I'm pushing the veggies. And then,
Yeah.
but part of me is also like, I don't want to create something where he feels like he has to finish what's in front of him. So it's just trying
And
to
it depends on the
unlearn and
kid's
unlearn.
personality because my
Yes.
personality, if I was told what to do, I would do the opposite. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
I told my parents, I'm like, didn't you figure that out? You should have told me never to eat veggies and I would have finished it all. And so I use reverse psychology a lot. I know this sounds terrible, but with my daughter,
Mhm.
it works really well because she's like that. If you tell her to do something, she will not do it. Whereas my son, you can tell him or not tell him, he will only eat what he wants, not a drop more. So sometimes he'll be chewing food and spit it out because he's full. I've never seen it. I'm like, why? I'm like, can't you just finish that extra bite?
Yeah.
But like he's like, no, I'm full. I'm not touching one drop more.
How
And so
interesting.
it's so fascinating because my daughter will just eat and eat and eat and eat, even if she's full, just because she wants to hang out and she wants to stay up late. And so it's just like, yeah, it's respecting that they will, no kid's going to starve themselves. And if they start to feel icky and constipated, I like what that happened with one of my kids. And I'm like, remember, you haven't eaten veggies in a long time. That's why we
That's
eat
a good,
veggies.
that's a good way of
And they need
framing
to
it.
learn that in their bodies because it's going to happen a few times. They're going to feel icky, constipated, stomach's going to hurt. And then I'm like, well, this is what happens.
Or
Oh, you didn't drink enough water.
this is why you're really hungry because you didn't eat last
You didn't have
while.
any protein. You're just having
Yeah.
and so I try to make it more educational without putting that pressure, but I know it is hard. Because I was always told to eat more. I really try not to do that to my kids because I know how, it was really hard. It was really hard
Yeah.
growing up
And there
being
were
told
always
that.
comments about our weight and girls, it's like, watch what you're eating, watch what this. When I got into strength training in my early 20s, and it drove my parents nuts. So like, you're turning into a man, you're this, that, because I'm doing like 10 pounds. Like, it's not like,
Yeah, you're
I'm
not
not,
like, and even
it's
if you
not
do,
it's not like a CrossFit workout, like, which is good.
which
It
is
was like a
still great.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very humble, like basic, a lot of body weight. And they were freaking out. Like, they were having like, don't do that. Because it's just seen as, if you do this, it's a dichotomy. You'll become super muscular and bulky. And if you do that, you'll be feminine. And it's like, no, it's not like that. And
There's
women,
no one
it's
definition
women
of,
more than men, even because of menopause. We need
we need
to
it. We need
resistance
to
train.
build bone,
We need to
bone
strength, and we
mass
do
and
need
muscle
fat. Like,
mass.
I feel like women do need hormonal profiles different. We need more fat in our bodies than men.
We do.
But like, so don't demonize, like, don't have to have a flat stomach because you need fat. And if you have a flat stomach, you're not going to have boobs, so there's always that trade-off. Like, it's just like
It's so true. Listen, that was me. I was thin, flat stomach, flat chest. I still have a small chest, but you know what? I think
yeah.
part of it is recognizing that all of these things that have been sexualized about our bodies were determined by men. It's a
Yes.
men's perspective of what
Yes.
they find sexual. Why don't we determine for ourselves what we like about our bodies and why,
Yeah.
it's a very different, even clothing, how it's made. It's made for men, by
Yeah.
men, for
Yeah.
women, but by them. So,
Yeah.
even just identifying like what we actually like about our bodies and
Yeah.
being more neutral about it
And that
is key.
people shouldn't feel bad, because honestly, just from weight training, clothes aren't designed, I find, for
They're not.
people who
My
weight
arms don't
trained.
fit into all my old shirts. They're too
Exactly.
big.
And but meanwhile, my saris all fit, but like, even my shoe size changed. Like, none
My
of
shoe
my
size
I had to
changed
get
too.
rid of all my shoes. I'm an extra half size than I was
I'm a
before.
half size bigger too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was sad because I had a lot of nice shoes. But
I know.
I mean, it's like your body changes, and it's, if your clothes don't fit, it's the issue's not you, it's the clothes. So
It's the
like,
clothes.
and there's a lot, clothes are made for a very fictional, like, a lot of clothes is made for a very fictional, idolized body type that doesn't fit most people, and it's fine. It's like, okay, like, it's like, who cares?
And
Like,
like,
just
think about men. If clothes didn't fit them, you think they'd be squeezing into, like, the average man would not. They'd be like, I need new clothes, right? There's not that psychological, like, oh, I'm not adequate enough if I can't fit into size
just
32 or whatever.
the pockets and the thickness of the material and the men's stuff, it seems so much higher quality than the women's. And I
It
think,
is.
why does none of my clothes have pockets? I want
Or
pockets. I
like
want somewhere
that
to put
actually
my
fits my
phone.
entire phone.
Yeah, no, and that doesn't fit my phone. And then it's like, of course my phone's gonna fall more often than my husband, because he has like clothes
Giant
that allow for
pockets.
phone, but we're not allowed to look bulkier, so we don't get pockets. It's just so frustrating.
I
But
know.
that's an aside. But it
That's
just,
in a,
people
yeah.
shouldn't
Okay,
feel
so
bad.
I have a question for you and your pull-ups because
Yeah.
so for those of you who don't know, Sarah sent me this video. We were talking about pull-ups and when I had my two kids, I'd be at the park a lot. So I'd be training for like, I'd be doing my scapular pull-ups and I'd be training a lot more from the monkey bars. And then Sarah was talking about how she loves doing pull-ups and she sent me this video of her just pumping out like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pull-ups. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So tell me about your training for pull-ups and how you made that happen.
So before, it's interesting, but before my son was born, I could do a few, but not 10, not anywhere near 10. And it wasn't like I didn't intentionally train for them. So it was like one, maybe two, and it was shaking. The form was like bad, but doesn't matter. Like I got over the bar,
You
so I was
got it.
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. And then after I had my kid, my circumstances changed. I used to go to the gym very regularly, and then it was impossible to go once he was born. We had no family in Toronto. It was just me and my husband. My husband
Mm.
worked long hours before the pandemic. He'd be home at 8 p.m. So where would be the time to go to the gym? And then my son didn't sleep when we're co-sleeping. I'd be in bed with him and be like it was like I couldn't detach from that.
Yeah.
And my husband is super supportive partner in that he does all the cooking. I have some strengths, but they're not household management. And I think it's common women with ADHD, they don't fit the role of the ideal parent. So sometimes you feel like a failure, but it's like, okay, no, I'm spontaneous, I'm creative, I can come up with things in a fly. That's my strength. It's not cooking and cleaning, which is essential. I admire that job, but it's just because I'm a woman, it doesn't mean I'm better at it. So my husband does that. So I had the support, but it was impossible like to go to the gym. And before I had my kid, I was like, no matter what, I'm always going to go to the gym. And I couldn't go to the gym. It was impossible. It
Mm.
wasn't practical.
It's not
So I had to
practical.
change my mix up of what I did. So I did a lot of like those postpartum baby classes to start. It was great to socialize. It was great for mental health. But then eventually I was like, my goals are now I want to do like my quote unquote like heavy goals from before,
Regular.
because I was doing things without weights. I was doing things like, and I was kind of like, I want to go back to what I did before, but I can't because I have different tools. So I didn't have like all the dumbbells. I had kettlebells, but it would have been upper body. Like I wouldn't have been able to hold up the 35, the 20 kilograms. Like it wasn't
It's too
just like
heavy. Yeah.
it was too heavy for my, so I was thinking, what can I do for my upper body? So I started doing push-ups. I did a lot of calisthenics. And then what was really sustainable was I could only work out with my kid because it was impossible. Like the kid barely slept. My kid happened to not nap. He
Sounds
was one
like
of
my
those
first
on
one.
me all the time. And so the only way I was going to work out was if I did it with him while he was awake. In the postpartum classes I did, we did a lot of workouts with the baby, which was great. But after some point, I'm like, I want to go back to my what
Regular
I did.
workouts. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of made up a different type of workout I would do whenever I was in the playground with him. So I learned how to do pistols, which I didn't know how to do before my pregnancy, because before I'd lift heavy, but now I didn't have access to that. So I trained to do pistols on my couch. So like pistols are one-legged squats. So I started like this, like I'm standing one leg and I'd sit on my chair and then I'd slowly lower the surface and I used garbage cans, I used whatever. And eventually I got to doing a full pistol and I had a
Amazing.
routine. I do everything like that. So I am not my background is not athletic, and it annoyed people when I worked in healthcare in a clinic because I would tell patients that came in, oh, you don't exercise. You only need to exercise 1 day a week. And everyone in the clinic, they have kinesiology background. They'd be fuming, like, what are you talking about? You have to do 150 of moderate exercise a week. I'm like, I know the recommendations, but I'm a non-athlete and I know what it's like to be a non-athlete. And if you tell them 1 day a week, it's way more sustainable. And from 0 to 1 is way more progress. And I was able to maintain my ability to do pull-ups and push-ups working out at periods of my life where I could only do it once a week. And I started once a week.
That is what you just said. That's literally what I tell my patients. I'm like, they're like, oh, I don't work out at all. I'm like, okay, what's your goal? 3-4 times a week. I'm like, okay, let's start with one.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the past year and a half, I've worked out 1 day a week on average.
Yeah, life happens,
But that's
especially
enough.
as a mom.
Yeah.
And what I hate is when if I posted a video on Facebook me working out, I get a lot of moms be like, "Oh, I feel guilty. I don't work out." I'm like, "Don't feel guilty.
It's
You
not
are
about you feeling
busy.
guilty. Yeah.
It's not sustainable. It's like there isn't like I am being, depending on how you define it, I am being selfish when I work out because sometimes my son would rather I do other things, but I need to for my mental health. If I'm going to be there for him,
Yes.
it's my non-negotiable, but I do it in a way that's sustainable for both of us. So I don't have the luxury of childcare. No, I don't mean luxury. I just don't have access to childcare and gym. So I made a lot of kinesthetic um, things in the park. So I
Love it.
started with scapular. I built like, cause you can go, I kind of made my progression. Megan Calloway has a
Callaway
pull-up
has a
program.
push-up.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And I followed her pull-up program to learn how to do pull-ups. And a lot of it is at home. Like I'm all for at home training if you're a new mom. actually for everyone. If you're not like into the huge barbells, you can do everything at home. And for
I
health,
work out at home.
you
Yeah.
don't need more. And I have a lot of like guys that are like, you know, you need the gym. Like, absolutely not. Like, you do not need a gym. Gyms are great if you have access to it. Yes, progressive overload. Yes, you want to lift more, but there's other ways to challenge yourself. You can do body weight, but like slow down the pace. You can slow down the timing. There's so many other ways to add resistance
Yeah.
other than giant weights. So like I did most of it was body weight, and I was able to get from not being able to do, because after you have your baby, you will, even if you were active, you're going to lose your ability to push-ups entirely. You're going to lose the ability. You have to kind of restart
Work back at it. Yeah.
humbling. And it's easier for me than my friends who are athletes. Like my friends who are competitive athletes had a rougher time being like, oh, I can't do what I did before.
Yeah. Cause
And
it's a
I'm really like,
psychological, like, what? Like my identity is
yeah,
shifted if I can't
yeah.
do all these things.
So for me, I'm a non-athlete. I hated the gym in high school. I didn't do any sports. And unfortunately, a lot of immigrant parents of girls don't get enrolled in sports. And that's something I hope will change. But they mean well, but it's like our, you know, in our community, like, well, we don't want you to get, I mean, a lot of Egyptian girls did do soccer. So I don't want to say it's universal, but like with my parents, like, we don't want you to get scarred. We don't want you to be outside too much. We don't want you to, you know, you're a girl. And it would have been different for boys, but for girls, it's like, you know, they're a bit overprotective. And when I started resistance training, they were not happy and they thought it would be terrible. But now my mom's like, wow, you look great. And I'm like, I feel great. I don't do it for looks
Looks.
personally,
Yeah.
but I feel amazing. I feel better than I did in my 20s. In my 30s, I feel better than I did in my 20s.
Right. Yeah. I get injured way less,
I
you
feel
know?
amazing. I have people that are younger than me in their 20s. Oh, I'm in constant pain. I'm like, why? You shouldn't be in constant pain. And again, I know like people who have chronic pain. I'm privileged not to have chronic pain. You shouldn't shame yourself if you have chronic pain.
It's a
How can
different
you
story. Yeah.
exercise? It's a different story. So there's no judgment. But for me, I'm like, can't you do something about it? Like if you're in constant pain, you're so young. You're so young. You're a baby. Why is it feel why does everything hurt? Like,
I
can you
know.
check it out? Go see a physio. I saw a physio just for like because I carried my baby all the time up until 2 years in the carrier constantly because he hated the stroller. And Toronto, unfortunately,
Oh,
does not clear the snow, so it's not very accessible. Like they do a terrible job. So I couldn't navigate the snowbank. So I quickly realized if I'm going to be car free in Toronto, I need a carrier. So I got the carrier. And again, that's what I did. But I went to a physio and I said, I don't want back pain. So can you show me how I should wear the baby in the ideal position? And they sort of went over things and they told me, you know, to have the baby facing inwards, not outwards. That puts more pressure. And it's also on the baby
on
as
the
well,
baby's
more.
hips. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So they explained that to me and I followed their advice and it was like preventative physiotherapy and it was great. Like so if you have pain, go see someone. You don't have to suffer. Like women especially shouldn't suffer. I feel like a lot of them just accept it. I'm like, you shouldn't be in constant pain. And I hope that they can find a solution. Sometimes they healthcare professionals don't know.
And
But
sometimes you
like,
have to see a couple different ones to attack, like, oh, mental health aspect or, nutritional aspect. And sometimes it is a team approach. But
yeah,
what you just said there is, I think it stems from a lack of self worth or feeling like you're worth taking care of and your needs are
yes.
worth attending to. Because I know in Indian culture, it goes from you serving your husband to then you serving your kids. And you're like, nowhere in that do you ever serve yourself. And I always say you have to serve yourself. Like you just
Mhm.
said, you have to take that time for yourself for your own mental health because you feel better. I have to do these things for myself. Otherwise, I can't show up for anybody else. And I'm the same. My husband does the cooking and cleaning. And I've often wondered if I have ADHD because I relate to a lot of women with ADHD. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds a lot like me
Well,
because
there's also a lot of gender expectations that pressure
there's
it.
that too, right? And I think that we assume that the women are going to be the ones with the strengths in cooking and cleaning and organizing their kids' lives and that, but that's not my strengths, and I think it's okay to recognize that. Tell me about your strengths because I know you love art and creativity,
Mhm.
and tell me about what you really love doing.
So I love art, but during like I've been doing baby portraits sometimes, but ever since my son's born, I haven't done my own personal art. It's been a pause, and I used to be sad, and I kind of Instagrammed one of my favorite comic artists. I said, "Are you still an artist if you don't draw?" And she's like, "No, life has different seasons, and sometimes you take a
Mm,
hiatus, but it doesn't make you any less of an artist." So I want to put that out there for any moms that are struggling
thank
to
you.
get
Yeah.
to do their own things, and you'll get there. It's just sometimes the kids will get more independent. They'll be a little more, but like right now, it's like you're not going to get your 8 hours or 7 hours of sleep. You're not. There's certain things that are impossible, and that's okay. Like, don't be hard on yourself. So I do my cars every morning. I do some stretches every morning, no matter what. When I wake up, I don't check my phone first. I do my cars and I do some stretches. And because I've having worked with some elderly populations, I feel like the joint mobility goes before the muscles.
Yeah.
So that's why I prioritize doing cars in the morning. And
Joint
like that
health.
cars means rotations with your joints for people that aren't physio or they're not in that
Movement
space.
professionals. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I do that. I do some stretches and I don't drive. So I
Ah.
moved to Ottawa. It's not friendly like transit friendly like
Yeah,
Toronto.
it's really not.
So
I lived in Ottawa briefly too.
I walk to work and people are shocked. Like, how can you walk to work? That's impossible. And I'm like, no, I do it. I have the gear. I wear layers. I toughen it up, and I get my exercise, so I get a lot of time. But I'm often late in the morning, so if I didn't do the cars and the stretches, like you should stretch before you run. Don't just run. But I end up jogging. But because I do the cars, I feel like I have never gotten injured. So I feel like at
You
least
have a
having
bit of
done,
warming up.
I
Yeah.
have a bit of warm up. Ideally, you would structure and do more warm up. But for me, it's more like, oh no, I left 15 minutes and I should have. Oh, I better hurry. And so like but at least I'm getting my heart rate up, so that's great. So I do that every day, and that's another. I will say it's good for my mental health because I have time alone from the kid. It's an extra, like, yes, it would have taken only 10 minutes if I've driven it. We only have one car and we're downtown. So if I'd driven, it would only take 10 minutes. And when I walk it, it takes like between 30 and 40 minutes, but
Mm,
it's great for my mental health. It's time for me. And
time
it's
for
like,
you. Yeah.
so it is a self-care living without the car, and I make it a challenge because it's like people are, you can't do that. I'm like, watch me. And I'm working a job where it's a shift work, so it
Oh,
will be challenging because I'll have odd hours and it'll be at the night, and Ottawa needs to be, it's not well lit. So there's things that I'll have to figure out and navigate, but I've been like pretty stubborn. I'm like, I can do it. And people are like, yeah, but what about -20? I'm like, I'll wear more layers. I have my
you
boots.
know, Ottawa has some of the most hardcore people because there would be people who cycling in the middle of winter. They've got their layers, their bikes, and like running in the middle of winter. So I do think you can do it if you are well prepared. I saw people
Yes.
wearing ski goggles in the windy, cold days with the snow. And I'm like, that's
Hmm.
really smart because how else are you going to see? you know?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know about you with your glasses. Like, if it gets covered in snow and wet, like, how do you see? Right.
Well, what I do is I always have a hat with a visor and it kind of covers it a bit so that
Oh,
I can
okay.
see. I never go out without, because even when it's raining, I wear a baseball cap because I need to have my glasses
Vision.
clear. So I come up with my own solutions, and I'll I take it one day at a time and figure it out. I'm not saying like I'll never ever, not walk, but also if public transit was better, I would have taken it.
True.
But public
It's
transit
not
ends up,
great in Ottawa.
it's not, no, so I have
No.
to walk it. But I've been enjoying it. Other things I do for myself is of course pull-ups and working out. And when I started, I did everything in the park with my son in the park. So I want to tell people, if they want to get started, you don't need fancy weights, you don't need
No.
fancy equipment, don't listen to people that say you can only do it if it's perfect. Half-ass your workout, divide up. Like, I was following Megan's program, she has like 4 days a week. I did two, sometimes one, and I still got to being able to do pull-ups. Consistency over perfection. Just be consistent if you can, and if you can't, it's fine. Like, sometimes I'll do only push-ups, like it's fine. But
Yeah.
I found that, and I used to be embarrassed, like, what will other moms think? Because my son will be playing and I'll run up, go to the monkey bars, do my training, come back to him, one up. And sometimes he's like whining, like he wants me to just play with him. But I figure like he's learning a bit of independence. It's like one of those trade-offs where I'm getting what I need. He'll learn with time. And now he kind of exercises with me, but he'll do like, I'm gonna do, like when I do my stretches in the morning, he goes, I'm gonna do baby yoga. And he just lies in front of me, so I can't do what I was trying to do. But again, it's like great, like it's great,
Well, and I
whatever.
think that I used to be a little bit embarrassed too because I was always the only mom working out, doing my squats, doing my hangs, and I would be doing all sorts of, I'd be practicing my balance and single leg squats and
Amazing,
push-ups against the bench. And
amazing.
I don't care what other people think because
No, I
they're
don't
sitting
care.
there on their phones, and I'm not judging because I've done that many
That
times
no,
too.
no, and that's what I was thinking. Like, would
Yeah,
it be better if I'm on my phone? It's fine on your phone, but like, I mean, that's why playgrounds exist. It's a space for the parents and the
for
kids to kind
playing.
of have
Yeah,
a to play. So like, I told myself, well, would I be? Am I, are parents judging me? Would they judge me if I'm on the phone in the couch in the bench? No. So why would they judge me if I'm on the
they
monkey
won't. They
bars?
don't care.
And
No.
I've never had anyone judge me. I had one kid be like, no, the playground's only for kids, and I'm like, I'm a big kid, and I'm with my kid, whatever. And
Yeah.
that's why I get mad when, like, in Toronto, I saw a few signs that are like, this is only for kids. And I'm like, no, we do way
Yeah, it
too
says
much
like
age.
five to eight,
age.
ages 5 to 12. And I'm like, screw that. I'm the size of
No.
some 12-year-olds. So I'm going to
Yeah,
say I
yeah.
can
And
do use this too.
I don't, we do way too much age segregation. I said, that's why I didn't know anything about babies because I hadn't been exposed to babies. And I'll tell you a
Yes.
beautiful story. My sister went to a book opening for an Indigenous author, and he was reading his, like, it's a professor and a student, and their student, and it's a book about residential schools. And actually, I didn't read the book, so I shouldn't tell you like about the book. But it was like beautiful. Like, there's, they're introducing their book, they're having a book launch at an independent local bookstore, and there was a baby crying in the room, and the mom, you kind of panic and you don't want to be disruptive. And then as soon as she tried like soothing and bopping, and it didn't work, and so she was heading for the door, and the speaker said, no, excuse me, ma'am, don't leave, please. Our community was denied, thanks to residential schools, we were denied the sound of babies crying, so I want you to stay. And I
Wow.
thought, like, how empowering, because moms feel ashamed about breastfeeding or doing anything in public with their babies. And here we have very much, this is a kid space, this is an adult space, these are daycares. And if you
Yep.
don't have a daycare, it's like, where are you supposed to go? And
Yeah.
so I was so like, yes, bring your
That's a
kid.
beautiful
And
story.
that's how we've always existed. And it's only like now we are like, now it's like, oh yeah, kids don't exist. What? Like, no,
Yeah.
they exist.
We try
Just
to
like some
separate
people,
everything. Like kids
just
are
like
here and adults are
yeah,
here. And
just like
this is,
people are like, well, how can you live in an apartment with a kid? Because we live downtown Ottawa. We value being in a walkable neighborhood over
same.
car depends seller. And I have, do you what works for you. I think if there's a lot of privilege for me, like I would never tell someone and advise them walk everywhere. I'm like, no, I can only do it because I live where I live, and it means higher rent. So,
Yeah.
and it means we'll never own probably. But like, so I'm
And
not
that's
saying
okay.
that I'm not. I'm saying I wish this was an option for more people, and it's not an option
Mm.
for people because it's unnatural to need to go out and exercise. It should be built into your life. So I feel bad
Yes.
people don't have that opportunity. That's why we should never shame people for not exercising, because there's a privileged component. Like, I live in a
It's a
walkable
system.
neighborhood.
Yeah. I think
Yes.
it's more, I think we often blame individuals when it's the system that doesn't allow,
Yes.
even in the hospital, what you said earlier, like it's the system that doesn't allow for doctors to spend that time because
Hmm.
they're rushed and that's
And
the
it,
culture of
and it must
medicine.
be hard on them when they have to bill like a bazillion. Like, I feel bad for them. I'm not
Yeah,
blaming anyone. It's just, it's too bad that that's the
the
system, and
system.
it's
Yeah.
too bad. And I think
Our
in the end,
systems aren't built for walking and for
yeah.
cycling safely. Ottawa's
Hmm.
way better than Toronto, but Toronto neighborhoods do,
Hmm.
but we can walk and walk to like 5 parks in our neighborhood.
That's
And
wonderful.
that's a privilege. And yeah, I don't live in a
Yeah.
big house with a big backyard, but I'm like, that's never been my value system. I don't want to clean all that and manage all that. I'm
I
happy living here. Sarah, I have some final thoughts and I have some questions about you. And I want
sure.
to know what book or podcast you listen to or read that has been kind of life changing for you.
There's quite a few. If in the line of Indigenous, there's an Indigenous podcast called All My Relations.
I'm going to write
Highly
that down.
recommend. You'll learn about colonialism, racism. You'll learn about all sorts of institutional issues,
Podcast?
and yeah, and it's really like loving podcast because there's a lot about celebrating female empowerment, the body, love. Like, it's, I highly recommend that podcast, and I've learned a lot about Indigenous issues through the podcast. Another one is 99% Invisible. That's a design podcast. So that's also really thoughtful. And I've learned a lot about urban planning through that podcast as well.
Cool.
And Canada Land, because I live in Canada, but people outside of Canada might not be interested. I like Canada Land and Planet Money. Those are more mainstream, but like as well. Like, so there's a lot of podcasts. I never have time for them, but like I really enjoy them when I do. It's like something I
Nice.
savor.
Nice. Nice. And tell me 3 things you like to do for yourself every day for self-care or rituals you like to do.
Cars, pull-ups, and um, hmm, This is funny. It's like, what's the third one?
What makes you feel
Our
like, oh, it's a good day because I did this, or I drank this cup of coffee, or whatever is your thing?
I think it's just doing the movement. I'm not even talking about exercise, but just doing the movement.
Intentional,
Always, yeah,
your
intentional
walks and
movement.
stuff. Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. And what's something that you're really passionate about right now?
Always art, of course. I'm passionate about learning because I'm trying to have a more open mind and just be exposed to more ideas. I'm passionate about my new field. I was very tunnel vision in my old field, and the pandemic derailed everything, like a lot of women I'm sure can relate. So I'm starting a new job as a fingerprint examiner and just
That's
learning
so
about
cool.
a new world. Like I'm very privileged and I'm restarting. Like it's like a completely like entry level, but it's like it makes me feel younger because it's like, oh yeah, neat. Like
Yeah,
you can reinvent yourself. So if any woman feels like they're stuck in
yeah.
their careers, there's always other opportunities you've never even dreamed of out there. So don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to do what people expect you to do. It's you can always change your course and and
And I
that's
think
yeah.
that's the benefit of coming from an immigrant family too. Like I am an immigrant myself, but I've seen my parents. They moved here when they were 40 and 45. And that's why I don't feel the same pressure to have it all figured out and have this one
No,
job I do forever, because I'm like, you know what? They came here, they moved across the world, and they still are working, but they worked hard, and they didn't let that limit them,
hmm
that, oh, I can't learn anything new because I'm old now.
you could go
Or like
back to
they
school
can go
if you
back to
need to.
school. Yeah.
You can try something new, whatever it is. It's okay. It's never too late.
I love that. I want to take a look at your art. So where can people find you and your art and connect with you?
So I can probably Instagram is the easiest way to reach me. It could be say Sarah with an H now. Say Sarah now is one word. And then I have another Instagram account called Drawdemic. So either of those, you'll be able to reach me and you can send me
Amazing.
DMs.
Amazing. If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
Um, I would want that we give people opportunities and recognize our privilege because there's a lot of talented people that are never given a shot. And just
Mm,
recognizing like people that are successful, especially celebrities are guilty of this where they're like, I've always worked. And it's like, okay, well, having a baby is work. You have a nanny, you have other structural things. So what are the barriers, like language barriers, pronunciation barriers, presentation barriers, structural rate barriers? If we address that, we'll celebrate more talent and also
yeah.
just not defining people by their jobs. Like
Yeah.
you are a full person and you're not I felt out of place in Toronto because everyone's talking about their daycares, and daycare did not work out for my son. He was kind of kicked out, and I felt a lot of shame about that. But there's no shame. Like everyone's different. Everyone has their path. So just be. It's okay. Like life is not a sprint,
Mm.
and just take your time. And things like sometimes they fall into place, sometimes they don't. But it's just part of the human story, and it's okay.
And you don't have to do things the same exact way as everybody
No,
else,
no, no.
as the
Honor,
mainstream culture.
and honor what you've been through. Honor and just like be open-minded to the experiences of other people that not everyone has those opportunities and just like not don't make assumptions. Like I remember telling people I really wanted to go abroad as a just like as an experience and the people from like non-ethnic they're white, they're like, well, you should have just done it. I'm like, no, my parents had expectations and it was really
Yeah.
difficult.
I know
and
it's
it's
not just
and
easy.
it's
If it was, I would have
like
done it. Yeah.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
so it's just again understanding that people have different realities and
Yes.
that just being mindful of that.
Mindful of, yeah. And I also love the point that you brought about, if you recognize people for their talent, you can also celebrate them. And so many people don't get recognized or found, discovered or whatnot, because they don't have the privilege of being discovered, and because they don't look like the right fit, or they're not,
Mhm.
a cis white male. There's a lot of barriers for people. And if we can remove some of that, we can really, everyone benefits. They benefit and everybody
Yes.
benefits. And
Yes, definitely.
that's amazing. And last question for you, Sarah, what would you say is your mom's strength?
My mom's strength is creativity. So where I lack in structure and routine, which is also very
Mm.
good for parenting, I am creative and spontaneous. So my son asked for a bus Christmas tree. I can make that happen because I have the gears go in my head. I'm unconventional. I can make things. So I have imagination. So I would say that's my strength is imagination and creativity.
Your your kiddo is so lucky to have you, and I'm so grateful that you spend this time with me. And the audience, I'm sure, is loving, listening to you as well. Thank you so much, Sarah. For anyone who's listening who found this episode helpful, maybe you know somebody who's pregnant or who also had a precipitous labor who would benefit from, hearing this conversation and feeling like, oh, I feel like my feelings are finally heard or seen. Please share this episode with them. If you know anyone who's a new mom and who's struggling with that diet culture and comparison and struggling to get back to exercise, share this episode. And if you know anyone who just wants to hear Sarah speak and hear this amazing story that she shared, please do share this with them. Thank you so much, Sarah. And to all my audience, thank you for listening.
Thank you.